Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Everything is Gay, Even the Straight Stuff, the podcast name, which is certified to make you giggle at least a little bit. We are halfway through our fabulous summer shorts, and I'm so excited to talk about this movie. Um, I think I'm excited because I have a lot of feelings about this, and this movie really is more about feeling than anything
Mm,
else. I have a whole bunch of research, but about halfway through looking at the research, I realized that not only was the research contradicting itself, but also that's not what really this movie is about. So before we actually get into the nuts and bolts of the film, Magnus, I have two questions.
hmm
The first is Batman and Robin a gay film?
Ooh, an hmm, interesting. I suppose it depends if you want to put a term to the film. Um, I would almost go more. It's maybe not gay per se. I feel it more straddles a wider umbrella than that. It's quite campy. It's quite over the top and such. Mm, I'm not sure. Um,
Okay.
I'm not sure how to sum it up, basically. I feel saying it's saying if it's a gay film, I don't know if it quite works like that. I feel it's a bit more of a broader appeal than just that.
That kind of leads into my second question. Is
Hmm.
Batman and Robin a good film?
I think that really depends on your tastes.
There we go.
Um, I,
Yeah. No, please finish the thought. Yes.
that was good. I think at the end of the day, it's such a unique, well-crafted film that it's very. I think on a broad appeal, you can enjoy it. But there's certain choices with direction and theming and aesthetic that really means that it will appeal really greatly to certain demographics, shall we say.
Yeah. Um, I like this film. I don't think it's the best film I've ever seen, nor is it the best film ever made. But I don't think it deserves the 20-year apology tour and degradation that it has been subjected to off and on ever since it came out in 1997. I do
Mm,
think some of the points are valid, and I do think it did change the trajectory of the superhero film. But I think having your main star apologize for a costuming choice that he had no control over for 20 years, literally continuing to make him apologize um, about it in a 20-year retrospective, it makes me feel like people want to hate on this movie for being gay in a lot of ways.
yes.
I think there's
I'll,
a ton of homophobia surrounding this film that I
mm,
find the more I looked at the angrier I got this morning, and I was as I was doing my final rounds of research, and I just realized almost everything about this film, including the way people talk about the Christopher Nolan films that follow and all the intervening like near decade, it really feel like people were dunking on this film because they couldn't come out and say it's weird that you decided to make Batman gay.
hmm
I just
Was
it's just so much about it. It feels like homophobia in rolling progress, and I'm so bitter about that.
do you think that as you call it, the apology tour was brought on because a certain demographic of the Batman fan base, the comic loving fan base, um, had certain basically they didn't like camp Batman and or shall I say gay Batman, and they got very vocal in that. So a lot of the be sadly Hollywood being Hollywood felt they had to apologize for any unintended offense caused, shall we say.
Well, here's the thing. On the one hand, I understand. Most of the criticism about it being what's called toyetic, which is basically turning it into a toy commercial, which is what the executives did. Most of Mr. Freeze's technology was based on toy executives wanting a certain thing.
Mm,
So I understand it from the aspect of it's a little bit too much of a toy commercial. In fact, Chris O'Donnell said that in an interview as one of the few negative things he ever said about it was it didn't feel like he was making a film. It felt like he was making commercial. I don't think that's necessarily like on one hand it's bad because art, but on the other hand it's Batman. Um,
mm,
the other portion of this and people not accepting this very camp turn as Batman, which by the way I absolutely love the Batmobile in this film. I love that weird late '90s gyroscope engine thing they've gotten. It's one of my favorite Batman Batmobiles. And the bat cycles are fabulous in this film. Honestly, really, they are. It's weird that the same people who have this brand nostalgia for Dad Batman from like Super Friends and Scooby Doo films couldn't accept Dad Batman and Batman and Robin. It feels
mm.
like they decided because there was an angle of queerness to it that this was
Yes.
the line in the sand. But also, so many people point to Alicia Silverstone and Chris O'Donnell as like their queer awakenings because of this film. I mean, Bane is basically written as a giant teddy bear dude. John Glover from Smallville plays the guy that creates Poison Ivy. And honestly, Uma Thurman, who crafted a career off of this film, by the way, um, plays probably one of the most hypnotizingly pansexual versions of any femme fatale character in the history of existence.
Mm.
So it feels a bit like talking at both sides of your mouth to just dismiss Batman and Robin and say, oh, it was so horrible, but thank God it was horrible because then we get Spider-Man and the X-Men series and they go in a completely different direction because, you know, Joe Schumacher and his gay Batman. We can't have that. Yuck, yuck, yuck. Like, I'm so angry about it this morning. You know what I mean?
I do. I do get what you mean, and it's totally unnecessary. We've had we've had quote unquote bad films before, and people will, they'll trash them or dislike them at the time, etc. That's fair. That's people's opinions. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to be an ongoing, constant legacy of trashing something. And that's not even to say that it is actually a bad film. As you say, there's flaws with it, but at the end of the day, it's because the issue is that vocal part of the fan base dislikes it so much, and because of how they view the characters as being portrayed, and because of that, it just tars the entire film in a certain brush. And yeah, it, I would say it's wholly undeserved. I mean, if you have a look at some people when they talk about awakenings and like their feelings towards this film, actually, there's some real positive viewpoints out there. Um, so it really does come across that this film is a little, dare I say, marmitey. I think you'll either get really into it or you'll really dislike it, and it might just be, you know, what side of if you do enjoy a bit of over the top gay campness.
Yeah. And I mean, there'll be people too that say it's not just a toy commercial, but it's not Batman. But they had they had toy executives, but also um I can't remember if it's Kane or Finger. I think it was Kane. There was someone that did Batman comics that helped supervise the script. I think it was Bob Kane. Like this was supposed to emulate the 50s style of Batman that would give us, you know, the 60s style Batman, the camp Batman. It's so weird that people like we're gonna see this again when we talk about the Nolan verse Batman because they use the Nolan verse Batman as like this weird hyper perfect version of Batman that quote unquote follows the comics. But they had one of the creators of Batman on Batman and Robin. Like, yeah, it was kind of a toy commercial, but one in '97 it wasn't even like the worst movie of 1997 for one. For two, sometimes Batman is like this. There are versions of Batman where he literally wore a rainbow costume. One of Batman's featured villains is a guy called Condiment King that could kill you with anaphylaxis. Like, I also I think they had, in spite of people apologizing, I think generally people had a good time on the set. Like there was some stuff that was stolen that had to be recovered, but like this movie is not as bad as people have been forcing people to apologize. Poor Joel Schumacher. Joel Schumacher even apologized for it, and it's like out of one side of your mouth you have George Clooney apologizing for you know making the decision to play gay Batman, but on the other hand, you have George Clooney not taking credit for playing Batman as gay. Like he did both things, and I'm super frustrated that I realized that he did not like he took ownership of it and then took back the ownership of playing gay Batman, which by the way, if he was playing gay Batman, he was also playing a sexual Batman because he didn't date a man in this film, which you don't have to do to be gay, obviously. But if you're going to play gay Batman and you're really going to do it, George, why didn't you give like why wasn't there like a Jimmy Olsen style reporter that you romanced? Like what does it mean to play a gay character? So just the apology tour before anything else in this movie just really frosts my taters, as I like to say.
Mm, uh, I know what you mean, and it's perhaps this is a brilliant example of, sadly, the subtle homophobia that you do find in Hollywood sometimes, and also within the comic community. It I wonder if it feeds slightly into the fact of, if with the comic with some people being comic character puritans, um we see our character in a certain light and such, and any variation from from the character or the source material has to be fought against. I just remember like the huge backlash you had with Star Wars, with when the sequel trilogy, when it tried to go in a totally different direction to what was expected, and there was a very vocal minority of the fan base that hated all the female characters. They hated that their heroes weren't as heroic as they had remembered them being, etc. I wonder if this is an example of a toxic fan base at the end of the day, overreacting about something that really doesn't deserve the overreaction.
I also think that's very possible, but I also think it's a little bit about the company kind of covering its ass a little bit because they
Mm,
rushed this movie into production and then, based on dailies, rushed Batman Unchained into pre production and rushed the idea of a Robin sequel that never got made because of this quote unquote failure of a movie. But like almost every decision people hate was a decision that was made by a company that wanted to push more product. Like they didn't like Batman Forever because they couldn't push enough products, so they wanted more product in Batman and Robin. I think at the core of this movie, there's something really interesting about gender politics that happens, which is why I think it works as a queer awakening. I think Alicia Silverstone playing a different version of Barbara Gordon is really great. And if they ever decided to do an Oracle movie, I think Alicia's still age appropriate enough and wouldn't have to deal with the rampant sexism as Batgirl that Alicia Silverstone could probably be a really great Oracle. Um,
mm.
and I think there's definitely a stomach for something like that now. I will say the poster is a little much, but it's nothing compared to the Marvel movie posters. Like this is like the predecessor of what we're gonna see Marvel do down the line with the Avengers. Um, I like the color scheme of the Batman and Robin poster. In fact, for many years, I had an Arnold Schwarzenegger Mr. Freeze poster because I had a lot of fun with this movie. I was at an age where watching Batman and Robin on ice skates like hockey playing this giant diamond did not phase me and should not phase anyone that's played a Lego Batman video game in the past decade. I feel like this movie understood that it was okay to have fun, and people just weren't in the right headspace for it. But it's not any more egregious than Batman Forever.
Mm.
It's really not. Like, if anything, I think it goes into that Bat family territory that we see now a lot with Batman Who Laughs and with people that do the fan art for Batman and the Bat family. So I just
Mm.
it baffles my mind that people hate this movie so much. So much that they were still making George Clooney apologize for it, and they made Joel Schumacher apologize. It's not even of Kiva Goldman who I'm gonna say this name wrong. It's not even Akiva Goldsman's worst writing credit
Yes.
by a long shot. Like I just the unfathomable homophobia that is attached to the
Mm.
never-ending apology to her for Batman and Robin really just frosts my taters.
Is it possible that that the hate towards it had gained such steam and such widespreadness because it became a popular perception that this film was bad, that people said it was bad and they kept going on about it, and then it forced people to apologize for it when they really probably shouldn't have
Yeah,
had to apologize for certain things. And because of that, it sort of snowballed to the extent of becoming a perception that was bad. Whereas if some people had spoken up more and said, actually, I like this film, or I don't think it's that offensive,
yeah,
it wouldn't have gained such a reputation. I mm, I think, to be honest, it would be quite interesting as a study to go and ask your regular mainstream fan what they think of this film, and I do wonder whether a lot of people would mention to them, and if they have heard of it, they might say, "Well, I think it's bad," and then you say, "Have you watched it?" A lot of people say, "Well, no, but I've heard word of mouth it is," and because of that, again, it comes back to the whole tarring the film with a bad reputation, and it just sort of lingers there, if that makes sense.
it does. I will say to the credit of people that do like talk about this film, it is not the most serious Batman film, and we see that in the Nolan verse. Is that part of the weird course correction that Batman and Robin does? Is the idea that somehow Batman and Robin is so silly and so unserious that you have to now do Butch Mask Batman instead? Um,
Mm,
but like, okay, fine, but have you read a Batman comic? Like ever? Are like I just the idea that all Batman comics are this serious, brooding, the film noir, larger than life Batman kind of discounts a very large period of history for the character himself. Um,
mm,
which isn't fair because there is something about Batman that does have a paternal anger to him. Otherwise, Superman probably would have beat him up a long time ago. They got to be able to stand each other in the Watchtower, you know?
mhm, indeed. It Sorry, I had a point, and I cannot remember what my point was. Oh,
I'm sorry, I
no.
just was going on a long-winded diatribe today about
Oh,
it.
no, 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 it's quite right. It was related to what you were saying. Um, it'll probably come back to me
Yeah,
at some point. Oh, I remember what it was now. So, a question I have to ask you is,
yeah.
does a film have to be serious and have a point if it's entertaining at the end of the day? Like, if it is pure entertainment, is that enough worth to justify itself?
Well, I'm going to say something very controversial yet brave. Hashtag controversial yet brave. Thank you, Trixie Mattel. Um, Joel Schumacher's most iconic and famous film, I think, answers your question because The Lost Boys from 1987 about the vampire brood that kind of takes in a new guy who decides to fight them is not what I would call a serious film. It doesn't like renovate the image of a vampire so much it turns into a vampire rock star, which is fine. And it's an iconic, endlessly quotable movie on par with Batman and Robin that is iconic and endlessly quoted when people decide they want to be silly. But like anyone that's seen Lost Boys should have kind of figured out what was going to be coming with Batman and Robin. Like a lot of the 80s movies that Joel Schumacher did, you can see shades of what we see in Batman and Robin. And people love St. Elmo's Fire. They love Lost Boys. They love Flatliners. Um, and as someone who's liked Batman forever, Batman and Robin's not that bad. You know, I don't think so, at least. Uh, I don't know if that answers your question at all. I don't know if
No,
that actually answers the question.
you have answered it, sir. You've given your answer at the
Good.
end of the day.
Okay. Yeah.
And my opinion of it is if a film can be entertaining, then that in itself has a certain intrinsical value to it. And the thing is, you were going in to watch Batman and Robin, superheroes fighting crime, going and having a great time while doing it. Yes, there might be drama. Yes, there might be thrills and stuff like that. But Batman has always come across as sort of like you high capers, like going out and beat up the villains and such. I mean, that's why the classic live action show had like pow, kapow. There's a history of Batman being a bit of escapism. So this film totally fits into that. So I do wonder actually what people were kind of expecting when they did go to see Batman and Robin. They weren't going to go and see an episode of Law and Order at the cinema, were they?
No, and it's one of those things where like it was it was in like competition with Men in Black, which people like remember more fondly, but Men in Black has that same kind of like suspension of disbelief. Face Off with John Travolta and Nick Cage um, competing with faces. It's one of those things where like I can understand if it was like we're gonna slam dunk on the diegetic music in the movie or we have concerns about the Batman and Robin soundtrack. I will say the music is a little more jarring than what I liked about Batman Forever. I did miss Nicole Kidman as Dr. Chase Meridian. I had kind of hoped she'd been back for the sequel, but to say this movie was so bad that it like almost killed the entire industry, like the 8 year long discussion after before we got the Nolan verse, which included an apology film that Joel Shoemaker was going to make, where he did a quote unquote real gritty Batman, the Joss Whedon film that didn't happen that was supposed to be the reboot. I mean, Batman Unchained basically continues that idea of we're going to make Scarecrow one of the main villains. It just is going to be a butch version of everything. I don't know. Um, I I think Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl is fabulous in this. The politics of Dick Grayson as Robin wanting to like work alongside Batman and even outshine him a little bit. I think it's very valid. The
Mm.
idea that Pamela Isley really just does want Gotham to do better. The film makes some valid points, y'all. It does them with candy coating. And yes, I understand that having Poison Ivy eaten by a giant Venus flytrap thrown is a little silly. But, like, the points still stand. The weird intrigue of I'm going to kill Mrs. Freeze because I can, kind of amazing. Like, iconic, dare I say. Um, And then
Mm.
the way that Uma Thurman as Pamela Isley revels in being Pamela Isley is the way I think about Margot Robbie reveling as Harley Quinn in the Harley Quinn movies.
Mm.
And I I almost think if you did Batman and Robin today, if you could, uh, like you'd have that same fan base for Uma Thurman that you have for Margot Robbie as uh as Harley Quinn.
Mm.
I really do think that, and it's a real shame. Um, I do think McGregor's disease is a little silly because it only exists in this movie and nowhere else in the DC universe at any point in time. So yes, it is a contrived plot device for Alfred, but it's part of the like Bruce's bad dad mythology,
Mm.
and I don't think that's bad. It was a pleasant blue color. It was a little contrived, but it worked for what it did. I don't think it was bad.
In indeed. And I want to touch upon a word that you used before, um, iconic, and I think that's a really good way to describe it because there's something about the the aesthetic choices in this film, the personas, the costuming. Um, there's stuff about this that really captures the eye, and you never quite forget about it. Um, like the I'm gonna say it, the nippled batsuits are legendary,
Yeah.
and everyone remembers them, and you see them straight away, and people know what they are and such. But I'd also comment that Arnold Schwarzenegger's turn as Mr. Freeze, Uma Thurman's role as Poison Ivy, and then like going a step back. I mean, looking at Batman Forever, like, oh, damn it, I forgot his name. Jim Carrey as the Riddler. Uh,
Yes.
like all of them, there's such iconic looks that you straight away recognize who they are, and I'm actually slightly surprised that I haven't seen, dare I say, more fan art and such of the characters in these roles because they've got such strong characterizations that it really does stick in the memory. Um, hmm.
Would you like a couple of interesting trivia tidbits that I know about this film?
Oof. Hit me with that trivia.
Ooh. So the first bit of trivia is that the um, sky surfing sequence, which looks motion captured, but it was motion captured. It was based on a skyboarder in a wind tunnel at a military base. So
Ah.
this is like use of CGI in the bridge between Jumanji and 95 and what we're going to see where there's too much CGI in the future, which I think is pretty cool. The second kind of trivia tidbit is that this movie, the origin of Mr. Freeze, Dr. Freeze, Victor Freeze, however I'm supposed to say it, was actually based on the Mr. Freeze origin story from Batman the Animated Series, not Mr. Freeze from the comics. And so that was actually kind of a big to do. Like if anything should ruffle comic purist feathers about this film, it should be that Mr. Freeze's backstory is not the comic Mr. Freeze's backstory. It's more based on the Batman the Animated Series episode Heart of Ice. So it's an interesting thing where they pick and chose really well what to use. Um, I really do wish it had been less toyetic. I think there is some silliness that the back credit card is silly, but I actually really like the kind of Robin is under Uma Thurman's spell, and that he
Hmm.
gets like real like if Chris O'Donnell is playing a Dick Grayson in his late teen years without the Teen Titans and getting to an age where he is almost on par with Batman physically. I like the idea that Dick Grayson is like he's not necessarily jonesing for the mantle, but he's jonesing to prove himself. I think Chris O'Donnell is really great in this movie, like a Nightwing sequel at that time in like 2000 or something with Chris O'Donnell's Dick Grayson taking over the mantle of Nightwing. Like that would have been an exquisite way to like continue on this version of the series or to give it to Batgirl. So I'm not mad at it.
Hmm. Um, the back credit card thing,
Yeah.
you know what? It's not like there's no way stretched from the truth of things. There's so many examples in the comics of Hit Bruce putting ridiculous Batnomas onto everything. there was an infamous one where he was with Catwoman, she was feeling sick, and he offered her the bat bucket, and he said, and she had to ask him to make sure she hadn't misheard, and he confirmed, "Yes, I've got a bat bucket in the Batmobile." So the bat credit card is not really a stretch.
That's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek Neo Batman thing too. Like he didn't do that until after this film, so I think it's supposed to be a dig at this film too. I could be wrong. Maybe it predates the film, but like it feels like a new Batman sort of thing, and I can't help feeling like it's a dig specifically at that scene.
Mm,
I hope
I
I'm
mean,
wrong. I really hope
I
I'm
don't know. I don't know. I it just come like I could see what I could see what you're meaning, but at the same time, like, and is infamous reputation-wise for like naming everything with a bat thing. So
yeah.
I don't know. I can't help but feel that it was happening before the credit card thing, or the credit card thing just fitted into an ongoing perception of that anyway.
Yeah. Well, so I want to make sure we keep to our shorts moniker for
Mm.
summer shorts. I've done a
Yes.
whole bunch of diatribing. Is there anything that you want to make sure gets included um, before we save Gotham by turning a computer screen right side up, as Alicia Silverstone's Batgirl did wonderfully so.
I think I'll bring what I want to say into a sort of brief summary. Um, at the end of the day, Batman Robin, like a wonderfully camp, over the top film. I think it's actually a perfect summer film to watch because it's got its adventure, it's great, captivating performances and such. Um, I go in wanting some nice superhero entertainment that's not gritty, that's not dark and such. And that's what Batman and Robin provide at the end of the day. And there's a good reason why so many people go on about the cast being their personal awakenings and such. And I think that helps to establish actually a really good legacy, at least in my mind, for this film. Um, I would say I wouldn't never say that this is a bad film by any stretch of the imagination. It's not perfect, but then is there anything that's perfect at the end of the day? I suppose the one thing I would really encourage people to do is actually go away and watch the film. Form your own opinion. See it for yourself. You just have to see it the once. If you dislike it, that's fine. But if you do see it, then possibly you found something that actually was well worth your time enjoying.
Also, enjoy the random cameo by Vivica A. Fox as one of Mr. Freeze's assistants. They never say her name in the film, but her character's name is Miss Behaven, which is maybe the best drag name I've ever seen on a non-drag character. Um, dare I say again, icon. And please let us know if Batman and Robin is actually one of your favorite Batman films. I really like the 90s Batman films quite a bit, mostly because I was at that age, but I watched them recently and they still kind of hold up for what you expect. But we're going to be back with more summer shorts shortly, as it were. And we will see you next time where Gotham gets a lot smaller, a lot grittier, and kind of looks like Chicago. But we'll see you next time when everything is gay, even the straight stuff. Bye.
Bye bye.